Hold to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
That depends on this misunderstood, unmanageable old machine.
And on top of all that, the telephone seems to be very dead.
He called me in my mind.
Well, what about the sonic time scan?
Well, first things first.
Here come the drums!
So here it comes, the sound of drums. Here come the drums, here come the drums.
Hello, and welcome to Pull to Open, a podcast about our ongoing quest to watch all of Doctor Who in random order. I'm Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal. We're a couple of guys who love Doctor Who, obviously, also have written about it, and are determined to watch it all on this journey with you guys. And we couldn't be happier to be continuing this in a new year.
Yes, it is 2022. We are recording this on New Year's Day, which means that I am personally in a condition which I would describe as glowing skull, which is kind of appropriate for our story today, which is image of the Fendahl.
Yeah, something's really hammering at that pentagram in the middle of your brain. I can tell. Yeah,
but it's all right. I've got some rock salt. It's all good.
Good. Yeah, mix that in with whatever hangover cue you got going on there. But yeah, it's 2022. We're excited. If you're trying to locate us in time, whenever you're listening to this, that's it. We're at the beginning of 2022. And it's a fun time for us in the podcast. We've been growing quite a bit over the past few months. Lots of followers on TikTok. We're up to about 3,300 now, and it's been really fun. We're sharing more and more clips of the show, having a little more discussion, and we couldn't be happier with all the response. And we really want to reward you guys, but we also want to have a bit of a push, a bit of a resolution here in the new year. So we're at 3,300. Now, remember, Chris, we used to talk about giving away prizes for our 1,000th follower, and we tried.
Yeah.
And I think that person was maybe not a big TikToker, so we couldn't get a hold of him, but we will most definitely give a prize to our 10,000th follower. So we just want to really make a big push over the next little while. Let's see if we can get to 10,000 TikTok followers. If you follow us on TikTok, and by the way, we are at Pull to Open on TikTok. Please share the channel with your friends. Share out the clips. You can use whatever. You can share it on TikTok. You can share it on your notes app or your texting app or whatever it is. But yeah, please get the word out about the channel and the podcast, and we'd be really happy to send prize TBD on exactly what it is, but we will definitely make it something special to our 10,000th follower.
Yeah, the TikToks we produce, the little bite-sized moments of Doctor Who bliss. So I think we're discovering that TikTok is a really great location for Doctor Who content and for reminding yourself about, what all these stories are about and what the controversy was and how the actor playing the Doctor performed in each episode. So we get into it there. Please share it around, comment there, get involved, leave us a review. We love all reviews.
Totally.
Any number of stars.
Yeah, the reviews. Yeah, that's another one. So if you are listening to the podcast form of this, which I presume you are, one, subscribe if you haven't already. There's a button somewhere on your app to subscribe, but also leave us a review. Reviews really do help our visibility in whatever platform you're on, particularly Apple. So we'd really like, in addition to a push for 10,000 TikTok followers, we'd love to get to 50 reviews. So we have a couple already, and our most recent one is by, I presume, a young lady named Claudia, because her handle is Claudia27. And she recently left this review. She says, "I'm loving Pull to Open. It's so much fun and has reminded me of just how much I love Doctor Who. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and opinions. I'm always so excited when I get the notification that there's a new episode."
Wow.
Claudia, thank you so much for that great review. Thank you very much for the 5 stars and showing everyone who is listening that it's that easy. Simply write a quick review on Apple or whatever service you're on, and we love to read it out and let you know how much we appreciate it here on the pod.
Yes, we very much do. And Pete, has it been? It's over a year now since we started our random adventure.
Yeah,
since we installed the randomizer.
Well, and that's the other thing, and like people don't need to know the I think behind the scenes mechanics of the show, but it's kind of what I considered season 2 of Pull to Open when we rebooted. So I'm officially with these pushes, and with the new year, it's season 3, everyone.
Yes,
of Pull to Open starting today. But yeah, it's been about a year since we did we installed the randomizer into the show, and it's improved it drastically. I will say, thank you, randomizer.
And the randomizer has taken us back to our last pre-randomizer location was the Invisible Enemy, correct?
That's correct. Yeah,
we wanted to. We thought it was a novelty to talk about a virus spreading.
Yeah, we figured it was our one chance.
Yeah, it was our one shot to talk about it, and we had no idea of Delta, we had no idea of Omicron, we had no idea that life was itself going to start sounding like a Doctor Who episode. So here we are with Omicron surging, and we are back in the Doctor and Leela era of the Fourth Doctor with the image of Fendahl, which is right after the Invisible Enemy, and also contains K9, sort of.
K9 sort of, yeah. Like K9 open panel of wires, which you almost feel like, well, we can get into it, but were they saying goodbye in the first episode right after they introduced him? I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was.
Yeah, it's kind of neglecting a robot dog is kind of the shorthand of what goes on in the image of Fendahl. Yeah. But speaking of what goes on, Pete.
Oh no, are we getting there right now? Is this it?
You can stall for time if you like.
We didn't even talk about that it's New Year's and there's New Who tonight. And
there's New Who. Okay, let's talk about New Who.
Oh God, I have to. A little bit here.
Wow. It's called the Eve of the Daleks, right? It's our 299th story on the Pull to Open Codex.
It will be in a few short hours.
It will be.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure. But Flux we decided was one whole episode.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, Flux is absolutely one episode. This is one episode, so I'm very excited that we are on the cusp of 300 stories to weave our random way through.
All right, yeah. Speaking of pushes, the push for 300. That'll happen, I guess, Easter, something?
Yeah, I think there's an Easter special coming up. I didn't even know the name of Eve of the Daleks until you mentioned it just now, so I know nothing about the New Year special. Very excited to.
Yeah, I only know from, honestly, social media. I've just been seeing like the official accounts tweeting out images with Dan and others who I gather survives Flux, because my big question to you, Chris, is
spoilers.
Should I binge the rest of Flux before I watch Eve of the Daleks?
I think so, yes. I think you need to know where we're at and exactly which reset buttons have been hit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll do it then. I've been such a bad fan this whole holiday. I've got a lot of personal sort of journeying and physical journeying, literally going to other cities, and prepping in my daily life for other things in the new year that I really have not had the chance to sit down with my family to watch the rest of Flux. But I think I'm just going to bite the bullet and just kind of watch it on my own, so that I at least I go to Eve of the Daleks with some knowledge. So I know what I'm doing after this recording.
And I know how difficult that is. I mean, it is sort of generally a thing in my family that my wife and I, we were brought together by Doctor Who, and we almost always watch the new stuff together, and it's kind of sacrilegious if we don't. So
yeah, exactly.
I
so
totally
when you are in that, and it's great to have that relationship because you get to bounce things off of people and discuss it right after, and that really gets your juices flowing. But it does mean it's sometimes a Herculean task in scheduling to make sure you can actually watch this stuff, because everything's kind of, I mean, isn't it interesting? Because it's like now that everyth's on demand, it's like just finding the time, and there's never time. Whereas when it was like appointment television, when it was like, oh, it's Saturday or Sunday or whatever it is, you would do it. You were more inclined to actually do it. Now it's like, oh, it's always going to be on some app somewhere. I'll just watch it whenever.
If we were recording this 10 years ago, we'd have to, seek the DVDs or maybe look on the dark web, as it were, for rips of the DVDs,
Rips. And, wow, that takes me back.
Right? Rip mix burn.
Yeah, man.
2000s kids unite.
Every real Doctor Who fan had a flirtation with BitTorrent back in the day. I'm pretty sure.
I do have a very strong memory when Netflix started streaming. One of the things that they had, because obviously they didn't have the vast library that they have now, but one of the things they put on very early was Doctor Who. And I remember, I think the very first thing I streamed on Netflix was the first episode of Spearhead from Space.
Neat. Yeah.
I'd never seen that, like a lot of Doctor Who I'd never seen, but I'd never seen the post-regeneration. And it it was, we all know what Spearhead from Space is like. It's we'll get there eventually, but it was just wonderful to think that Doctor Who was now on demand, and that's such a strong memory of mine from the beginning of the streaming era. And yes, here we are with it all sitting there on BritBox, and just
some with
not
warnings.
enough time to do it. Some with warnings, and not quite on this one.
Not on this one,
although.
You might think after watching it, I don't know. But I think
we needed a warning for Lena's sexy outfit.
And perhaps some situational stuff that happens around it. But
yeah,
let's get into it. I think I've stalled quite enough. And by the way, everyone enjoy Eve of the Daleks. I'm sure by the time you listen to this, it's going to be well spoiled on the internet. So we'll maybe chat briefly about that next time.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna have to stay off Twitter all day until I've
for sure
gather the fam to watch this thing.
That's the general North American thing you just got to do on Doctor. You can't go near the internet for that 7 to 8 hours between the UK broadcast and our broadcast. But here it is, Chris.
Thanks, UK.
We've come to it where I have to summarize the plot of the adventure that we just watched.
Yes,
Image of the
segment. This is the segment we call TLDW, Too Long, Doctor Who. Or Too Long, You Didn't Watch, but we did. We watched so you didn't have to, which I would say is probably a good thing with this particular story, but we'll see. Anyway, it is a old Who episode, and we give 30 seconds per episode for the summarizer, which in this case is Pete.
Yeah.
And there are 4 episodes, so Pete, you have 2 minutes.
2 whole minutes, okay.
2 whole minutes to tell us the entire plot of Image of the Fendahl.
So the pressure is really on. I know because Classic Who tends to be, as we found, maybe it's slightly easier because you have just a little more time because most of these are 4 episodes or longer. But honestly, I feel the pressure because we've both done a pretty good job in the last few times of doing summaries, and now I feel like I'm the pressure is now don't break the streak, right?
I will say I'm so glad it's not me this week.
Well, yeah, and this one is a little bit. There's places I already feel like it's going to go wrong. As I was getting ready to record, I was thinking, oh right, I've got to do this one. Dang. And I actually read some plot summaries and they didn't help. They didn't help at all.
There's definitely a WTF is going on element to a lot of Image of the Fendahl. So I'm very excited to hear where you will take us, and good luck. Don't get snagged on individual scenes. I think this is what we've learned from.
Okay, so I've hidden all my windows. I'm staring at absolutely nothing but a blank desktop. Can't even see the Zencaster. Just give me a countdown and I'll go.
All right. In 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, it's modern day England, and there's the Doctor and Leela in the TARDIS, and they zero in on a signal they get, which is from sort of a sonic time scanner that's being emanated from this place in rural England where there's a bunch of scientists at this old mansion type place that they're investigating a skull. Why are they investigating a skull? What's interesting about the skull? Well, it's 12 million years old, and it was recently excavated. How can it be 12 million years old? Humans have only been around for a few million years on Earth. That's the big conundrum here, so they're investigating it. It turns out that this skull is actually an alien that has fallen to Earth millions of years ago. It's originally from the 5th planet. The what 5th planet? Jupiter? No, there was a 5th planet between Mars and Jupiter, and this evolution went up a blind alley and created something called the Fendahl, that was actually so dangerous the Time Lords destroyed the whole planet, but it somehow escaped before then, projected itself to Earth, and was sort of buried for millions of years to be found. And it has actually been influencing evolution in some ways, and actually, we're not really exactly sure how. There's a couple different ways, but it's basically been playing this super long chess game and positioning all these people, the scientists and the time fisher that is close by this village and everything, to sort of recreate itself. And it's a gestalt creature, which is actually made up of all these weird worm-like things that are called Fendahl. And the Doctor gets there and figures all this stuff out. Makes sure the people there are protected to the extent that he can, but a lot of them die. And then he basically gets the Fendahl, the skull, in a box at the end by distracting all the Fendahl, and he takes it in the TARDIS to throw it in a supernova and destroy it, thus eliminating the danger. And has a new outfit.
Nice. Good job.
There was so much to explain with the Fendahl itself. I realized I was I was only explaining that I couldn't really even say anything about the horror stuff. And there was a point when I talked about the people, I was like, wait a minute, he doesn't protect anybody, other than like a lot of people die, and he just gets rid of the Fendahl. Which is kind of a weird thing in this one. There's a lot of people
kind of rubbish. I mean, he's classic Tom Baker. He's bumbling around in a wonderful Tom Baker way. It's he's really having fun with it. You can certainly tell, but he's kind of sidelined or kind of remote for a lot of the story.
Well, he's barely in episode 1. I mean, he's in it. It's just that he doesn't do anything. He just kind of gets there. And then the cliffhanger is he's paralyzed. He's not even moving.
Yeah, and you didn't really mention the local yokel aspect of this episode is strong, particularly with Mother Tyler, Martha Tyler.
Yeah,
no relation, maybe a relation. Interesting.
Interesting. Right.
Yeah.
I just got that.
Right.
Tyler. Yeah.
Yep. They are the Tylers. She's Martha Tyler, which is an even more interesting thing. I wonder if RTD was influenced to create both of the first two companions of New Who. From that name. Yeah.
There's a lot of Marthas, Tylers, and Joneses in Doctor Who. Jacks and Jackies.
But Martha Tyler she kind of steals, Daphne Hurd played it, she kind of steals the scene, every scene she's in, pretty much, by being this sort of...
Because she's kind of there at the beginning, and she's kind of just the creepy old woman stereotype. She says something to the security guard at the Priory? I don't forget how do you pronounce that?
Right, she was the cook for the scientists, right? And then she gets basically booted by some officious asshole who's been drafted in as security,
right?
And then goes home, and it turns out all of her, talking of magic and charms and putting rock salt in bullets, all this stuff turns out to be accurate. All of this old wives' tale stuff that she keeps spinning.
Yeah, well, there's a bit. There's sort of a turning point for her character, I think, where the Doctor. I think it's in episode 3 where the Doctor basically says she's lived here all her life, and there's a time fisher here.
Yes,
and she's like, it's not unusual in that case, and where for someone to manifest precognition and certain abilities, which is kind of an interesting this sort of idea. One, it's ambitious. This is the thing about the episode. There's a lot of ambitious stuff thrown in, right?
That doesn't necessarily pan out. Yeah,
the human evolution. I mean, it's compelling stuff, and that he tries to explain almost all sort of paranormal stuff by this time fisher idea. The Doctor even says at one point, this is. I think he actually explicitly says that, time fishers. It's where this is what this is. And so it's I don't know if that really works, but it works for her character because that's the turning point where she kind of becomes really pivotal and key to the rest of the episode and them actually being able to fight off these Fendahl things.
And she sort of has the most memorable line at the end, like after they fought off the first batch of Fendahl. She's with her grandson Jack,
right?
And she's like, "There's gonna come a day I'll get too old for this sort of thing." and it really is it's sort of.
Sergeant
I mean,
Murtaugh.
You say it's set in modern day Britain, but it's definitely got old Britain kind of feel. Martha Tyler's very much a character you don't see anymore.
Right. It's like modern Britain for when it was broadcast. I mean, I don't know, but I guess even for then, you would say like this is more of a almost Downton Abbey, at least one half of it. Like,
well, it's kind of a reminder that even in 1977, when this was airing, it's sort of like the old Britain was still there, kind of pretty close to the surface. And it's sort of fascinating. I mean, I really didn't like a lot of the episode because so much of it is taken up by scenery-chewing actors playing the scientists.
Agreed. Right? Yeah. And it's like
Max and Colby are just, wow.
Yeah,
guys,
I mean,
dial it down a bit.
Well, Max is like they're both bad in their own way. Like Max is kind of nobody. You can almost think he's going to be a bit of a Nider, if you remember that character from Genesis of the Daleks. Basically, like a lieutenant who's ruthless. You almost feel like that's his thing in his initial interactions with Fendelman.
Yeah,
but he, obviously the tables turn and he becomes the head of the coven. Or whatever, and then he's the guy who has the designs on megalomaniacal power. So it's a bit of a interesting mislead there because you're led to believe Fendelman's the bad guy, but it's really this dude. But he's so bland. Like all of his lines are like, "You're fools," or that's just really kind of like paint by numbers, mustache twisting, evil guy stuff. And he never even gets a good costume. Even when he's like at the end there and it's he's got the pentagram set up and he's got all his followers, he's still wearing that lab coat. And I'm like, dude, where's
all they could afford was lab coats.
Where's your weird headdress and like robes and stuff? Like, you're not even looking the part.
Yeah, they really spent all the costume budget on the Fendahl. That Thea, we should mention Thea, the other scientist who really doesn't get any kind of backstory, right?
Yeah.
We don't particularly care when she turns into the Fendahl. And that's sort of the thing. These characters are so uninteresting to us and uninteresting to the Doctor even. Like he hands a gun to, oh God, who is it, Max? No. God, who's
the rifle?
Yeah, no. The gun at the end to shoot himself.
Oh,
yeah, Max who shoots himself.
Max, yeah.
Yes, and he's just like, his. Max is like, oh, there's a gun on the altar. It's not, and Doctor's like, that's not going to work on the Fendahl. Max is like, no, it's for me. He's like, Doctor's like, okay, sure. There you go. Sorry about this.
One less Fendahl to deal with. Yeah, that was a bad scene on a couple of levels. One, I mean, we've seen this a little bit with Baker, certainly, like his coldness and sort of this, definitely a change in newer Who when he's really fighting for every life. Like there's more of I'm playing a bigger chess game of sense from Tom Baker's era, and this is definitely one of those episodes.
Yeah, we've on our pull to open journey, we've sort of seen a lot of moments in Classic Who where the Doctor is just sort of surprisingly cold. I think of Planet of Fire, where he basically destroys the. Oh God, my brain is running slowly today.
Yeah.
No, well,
and
the chameleon, chameleon, where he's just sort of like, okay, here you go, assisted suicide kind of situation.
At least I would say in that case it was intentional, and here it's a little more casual. And I don't like the taste of it here as much. It's
not entirely clear what the stakes are at any juncture. First of all, it's just that there's a pentagram. There's the Fendahl sort of dancing around. I mean, really well done to Wanda Ventham, who plays Thea, who becomes the Fendahl. Who's just sort of like there, kind of waving her arms a lot. in the sort of the scary moments where she's manifesting. But like, what exactly is happening? And you only get told briefly that they need 12 people, or is it 13?
Yeah, 12 Fendahl plus her. It's like the Gestalt creature. Yeah, there's so much that's done wrong. Like you're dead on in that the stakes on any, like the overall stakes are made clear, but at any individual scene they're really confused. Like the Doctor just kind of goes into the basement at one point, and it's very open. Like this is where the pentagram is, and you know the Fendahl is sort of turning things into Fendaline, but there doesn't seem to be much danger. Like it's almost at some point you're like, why are you even trying to hide? Because I can see you, and if I can see you, the Fendahl can see you. And there's a point that you were just talked about where he gets the gun. Like he's clearly just wandering around this room and like giving stuff to whoever right in front of the bad guy with no consequence. Like what's the threat here exactly?
Yeah, and the costume is so sort of cool, and you know the dancing is kind of the Fendahl costume, and the eyelids sort of painted on the outside. It's
I didn't mind that.
Cool.
Yeah, I like the eyelid painting stuff. Some people don't, but that was a classic Who thing they used a bunch of times, and it's usually done pretty well. I thought it was done well here. And
it's such an iconic image. It's actually all that I knew of image of the Fendahl as a kid was the image of the Fendahl itself it's just that. And this is a lot of thing about this sort of era of Who. It's like it throws up these kind of classic images that don't necessarily follow through into a great story, but you know, I will remember the Fendahl forever. I'll remember her beautiful gold costume, has kind of this sort of Greek statue look, and you know, I sort of overuse on Pull to Open the notion that certain eras of Doctor Who kind of look like a David Bowie video. This is, I mean, Fendahl's costume could be a David Bowie costume. All that, the gold and the eyelids, like it really has a music video kind of feel to it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I will say you're right. You're dead on in that this is a very memorable episode for all of its flaws, partly because of the things you cited in the costuming, but also and just sort of the sort of big picture stakes, which are kind of interesting, like the idea that the Time Lords destroyed the fifth planet in our star system to prevent this weird backwards, what did they call it? It's like evolutionary blind alley, where
going up a blind alley,
something like natural selection turned in on itself. So this thing evolved that basically just consumes life itself, even its own kind, until presumably there was like only one of these things left, you know, and they had to destroy the whole planet to try to get it, but it didn't work. That's pretty
I was
cool.
really hoping for more Time Lord mythology in this one, because it is kind of rare to mention the Time Lords in a kind of a gothic adventure like this. Doctor seems strangely uninterested in talking about it. There's a weird jump cut at one point to he and Leela going searching for this planet, right?
Well, they go back in time.
What they're doing? They go back in time to try and find it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's just like it's a pile of stuff at some point. Because I like the idea of them doing that, because that's a cool sort of Doctor Who thing you can do. You can actually step out of the adventure for a minute. It's a good sort of thing to do for pacing and some exposition, and just sort of like show the greater mythology of the show, which is great. But here it's like not much is delivered. One, which is kind of okay. It's a bit of a mislead. But the other thing is, like, I remember he goes like, "Okay, we're going to come back tomorrow night." Which I'm like, wait a minute, you got a time machine, dude. Like, why don't you come back 10 minutes earlier?
Seriously.
In fact, like, it's like, what is that about?
And there's a point where we cut to Leela on the floor of the TARDIS.
Yes.
For no apparent reason.
Yeah. None.
And it's super weird. And you just sort of, like, I got really sort of creepy vibes in the way that Louise Jameson is used in this episode. Like,
she gets knocked out and thrown on the floor a couple of times, or falls to the floor.
And the costume doesn't leave. Yes, the costume doesn't leave much to the imagination. It's kind of one of the first things I knew about Leela before I saw a lot of her episodes. Was I read the Doctor Who companion book that came out for the 25th anniversary was, and it talked a lot about, you know, it was a sort of a nudge and a wink about how Leela was brought in for the dads. who are watching after the sports to keep them watching, because here's this woman in a skimpy outfit, and you can really see kind of almost everything, and it just sort of, especially in this setting.
Yeah.
Especially in the setting where sort of everyone's bundled up and it's kind of clearly cold and misty, and have her running around like this, it just sort of,
I mean, the thing is, she's capable, and it, like, her character's good, and sort of like you can kind of forgive some of the outfit implications on a story level. But here, I just feel like on top of the sort of costume issues, she's thrown around physically in these ways that are even more compromising, and even that point where the doctor ends up pretty much on top of her could have been worse. Could have been worse. Like, luckily, like, it's not played in any way. Like, there's not even, I think, much of a double entendre there, or maybe I've just missed it. But it's like you just the fear, the sheer look of that moment where Tom Baker's like right on top of a scantily clad Louise Jameson. Just okay. All right.
The hands are sort of going uncomfortable places in that scene, and it's so I watch on BritBox on Apple TV, and there's always like a preview image of the episode. It took me a while to get to episode 4, so it was just sort of sitting there in the preview, and it's basically a still of Tom Baker and Louise Jameson laughing, and he's basically on top of her in a very compromising position. When they've just sort of escaped or killed the Fendahl. It just sort of, it looks like an outtake. It's super weird.
Yeah. Luckily they get out of it quickly. But yeah, I think ultimately, like, Louise Jameson said she really likes this episode. I think shows she liked the writing. Her character, like when she's not in those positions, is okay. Like, I mean, she's Leela. She's strong, and she's pulling out her knife. Particularly like the bit in the first episode. It's classic Leela. She's just got the old guy with the knife to his throat. And
she feels a lot more Leela-esque in episode 1, and then it sort of just fades, and the story forgets about her a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the thing about holding the knife up to that guy, though, I sort of I liked watching it this time, because I sort of caught, like, I don't think I even caught it the first time when I went first years and years ago, where that's the same guy later who's bad. Like, he's one of the followers of Max. So her instincts were correct. Like, he wasn't just hanging out and the innocent villager just doing things. He's a bad guy, and so it sort of gives Leela a little bit more credibility, and she's not just this bumbling savage that just grabs whoever.
It's interesting because we're in the season after the Talons of Wen Chiang, right? Which was the last time that the randomizer took us to a Leela episode. And she was really strong in that. She was such a strong character and very well written, in a great costume for Victorian London. Not so distracting for the dads watching.
Right.
And to come here and to see her sort of sadly diminished a season later, it feels like we've gone backwards.
Yeah. So literally diminished in the case of her hair, which apparently was a bit of a flub on the hairdresser, I guess.
Yeah.
She didn't want it cut that short, and then they did, so they were like, well, I guess we'll just put it up. There we go. Sorry, Louise.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit of a mess, which is very unfortunate. And it's definitely one of those Doctor Who stories where the other actors are, it's almost like they're saying, this is our one shot at being on TV, and we're going to act the hell out of it. We're going to shout. I mean, Colby's character. Let's talk about him. He was super annoying.
And he shouldn't be. Like, here's the thing. Colby's character is there to be kind of the cipher a bit for the audience, because Leela is not quite normal, and he's kind of the regular guy who's either he's a little bit like, do you remember Inferno? And who is that guy?
The Australian guy, Sutton.
Yeah, Sutton, who came, and he's sort of like the sensible one.
Yeah,
you feel like that's going to be his role.
This is madness, and we've got corpses turning up, and what the hell are you doing? And but he goes straight from 0 to 60 on the snark level.
Yeah, and at the weirdest times, and like, even at times he really shouldn't be, right? There's a point where he's like a prisoner and he's tied to the pillar. Yeah, and this is a point where you really should be like trying to learn more about your opponent and finding some way to get out of it. Like, and he's just like, he just keeps insulting the guy.
Yeah.
But like, no, and he actually almost says, "Oh, enough of your speechy. Like, I don't want to hear it. Like, what are you doing? Like this is the guy who you should be talking to and negotiating with or something, but you shouldn't be just trying to insult him and shut him down. Like, what are you thinking, dude?"
I mean, in theory, he has an interesting character arc because right at the end, he comes to accept the Tylers, right? Even after being super insulting to Martha Tyler with all this talk. Oh, you old witch! This is all your fault,
right?
And then at the end, I mean, we were robbed of a scene that really should have been the end of all of them, you know, having scones and tea from Martha Tyler's best china. You know,
right?
It's such a British moment. Like when the threat of the Fendahl is over and the explosion happens. By the way, I'm really not sure what the hell they were blowing up or how or why the flames were going backwards, but I appreciated the trippy music video aspect of that.
Well, they couldn't blow up the place. Did you know that was like the estate was actually the same estate they had filmed Pyramids of Mars in?
Yeah.
So speaking of randomizer connections,
yes,
that's a pretty good one. But it's actually owned by Mick Jagger. It was. And so apparently, like, he was, yeah, man, go ahead and film there. The only thing he required, like, was, well, not the only thing, but like one of the key things was you can't do any like explosion stuff. Like, don't do any of that. Film all you want.
I sort of picture the negotiations with Mick Jagger and the BBC production team, and they're sort of hiding explosives behind their back. Like, nope, yep. Okay, no, we're not going to. Yeah, that would be such a easy thing to do in the script that we've done a million times before to actually blow up the mansion. Nope, we're not going to do that.
Well, but they do it. It's all effects, and it's all like, you know, they actually reverse the flames at one point, but I guess that's okay because it's supposedly an implosion.
Yes.
Yeah.
But so to hide from this, Colby and the Tylers hide under the table,
right,
in the Tylers' cottage.
Yeah.
And they're all sort of cuddled up together. It's kind of sweet. They've all got their arms around each other. And it's kind of, it could have been a good character arc of Colby learning to accept the weird witch in the neighborhood who actually has more information than he, a snarky scientist, could ever have dreamed of.
Yeah, if only we cared about him.
Yeah, I know. And it's weird because he sort of grasps everything the doctor's telling him immediately and kind of talks about, oh, so evolution went down a blind alley, did it? Well, that, you know, and he starts theorizing.
Well, that's the great thing. This is where that dialogue actually is able to do its job because the doctor can talk to someone who kind of at least knows a little bit of what he's talking about, which is why I think Leela, for this kind of thing, doesn't quite work. She's not that sort of stepped between the doctor and the audience that you kind of need.
Right. It's not a sounding board.
That's like the best scene for Colby when they're kind of going back and forth on the theories of how the Fendahl could have influenced mankind, either sort of just through sort of this broad effect, like, you know, they sort of debate on how sweeping it would be, which I really like that they keep it open-ended, actually. That it's like, did the Fendahl like literally create man or influence, you know, hominids in its own image? Or was it much more subtle by like simply inserting some RNA here and there to move these things together, and you could chalk the rest up to coincidence, like the thing that, you know, that Fendelman's name is Man of the Fendahl.
Yeah. And you know, I love that they talk about RNA first of all.
Yeah.
Having all just taken our messenger RNA boosters.
It works. It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. So there's real science at play here, and I kind of wanted more of those scenes because the story is clearly reaching for some sort of intersection of magic and science, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Basically, you know, proving the Arthur C. Clarke quote about any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And what the Fendahl is doing is so advanced that even the doctor is like, I don't know, maybe. I don't know. What do you think? The doctor's sort of strangely unsure of exactly what's going on here with the entirety of human evolution.
Even though he gets like, he's strangely really well informed. It's this thing that happens with Baker episodes of this nature where he just comes in, seems like that's a Fendaline, I think. Like I know what that is. And there's even a point where he says, "Don't look at her eyes." Right.
Yes.
And it's like, well, how do you know not to do that? These sort of magical things he just kind of knows. Don't do this, do that. And Salt kills them, although he kind of deduces that, I guess, arguably. But
it's interesting because over the Christmas break, I introduced Doctor Who to a friend. Never seen any of it before. And the thing I always do, the episode I always go to, is Blink. So that was very strong, very recent in my mind. Just every time I watch Blink, I'm like, this is such a masterclass in how to write a story, right? Because the stakes are clear, even as the stakes are revealed, and it's that super strong scene of like, don't blink. Okay, I get it, I understand, because they seeded that, and then I was reminded of that by this sort of weak moment of don't look at her eyes, and it's just like, yeah, but why?
Yeah,
what happens if you look? None of it's been established. And it's just kind of a mess. And
also, there's the bit where he's trying to get Max, and you've already looked in her eyes. It's too late. It's like, really? Okay, well, didn't because the guy kind of looks at the Fendahl, or when they're there late, or the Fendaline, sorry, because the Fendahl and the Fendaline are in the hallway at one point, and Leela kind of looks up for a second when she's got the gun, and you're like, oh wait, did she just do? Oh, I guess that didn't count. Like, is it okay if she shoots it with Salt and then they're okay? Like, I don't know. It was a weird thing. And there's, like I say, there's a lot of good ideas here. There's a lot of good atmosphere. At some point, though, it just sort of, the House of Cards just falls apart. You're just kind of like, wait, what's going on? What happened? And you really your liking of the story depends on how much you're really buying into the atmosphere of it. Because I got to say, atmospherically, it's quite good. It really is like an epitome of what I would characterize as this late 70s, early 80s sort of gothic horror devil. You think about things at the time, right? Like devil worship, everyone was worried about. There was this is John Carpenter's height, and he's doing like Prince of Darkness and whatever else. There's all this, even stuff like Pyramids of Mars had elements of this, which was more Egyptology, but sort of that spooky nature of it. It's all
we're sort
there.
Of in the world. We're sort of entering the Satanic Panic era.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's what I was getting at. Exactly.
And this is definitely an example of that. These days you see a pentagram and you're just like, okay.
Where's the party?
Yeah, but here it's sort of presented as a thing that should be scary in itself to the audience. And it's an interesting choice to have the Fendahl not speak at all, but I would have loved some Fendahl dialogue.
Agreed.
Just to help explain the stakes.
Well, apparently the writer, who is Chris Boucher, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right.
Boucher, I think, yeah.
Boucher? Chris Boucher. But he wrote The Face of Evil as well, and also one of my all-time favorites, Robots of Death, which we'll get to eventually. But he said, he's on record as saying, he can't write dialogue for God. And he because the scripts call sometimes for these godlike beings, he really shies away from dialogue there. And I get the idea, because it's like nothing that you write could be what people would imagine the thought process of a godlike being would be. But if you don't have anything there between the Doctor and whatever the adversary is, you damn well better make sure there's someone who is of sort of a comparable intellect and mind to the Doctor to go up against, and that person doesn't exist, right? Like there's maybe Fendelman, but then he's off, and certainly the Max Stale guy is not. I mean, I think that's how it is. Max Stale, or is it Steele?
Yes, Max Stale.
Stale. Okay, pretty stale.
It's super confusing. he's kind of stale. Yes, but I really think we should have reduced the number of scientists and give Dr. Fendelman his sort of chance at acting the villain, which is sort of where you want him to be, especially with that great German accent of his. He could have been another Stallman.
He could have, and I don't mind the mislead, right? Like you think he's going to be that, and then he doesn't. It's just that, well, what you replace him with has to be better, worse, whatever you want to look at it. And you just have this woman dancing around in a costume, some, paper-mâché caterpillars, and this stale guy. I mean, it's like, all right, well, I guess they
Sure,
they don't add up to much.
Yeah, they really don't. And can we talk about the Fendahl? I think
We
that
can.
coming here after so recently doing the Green Death with the super cute maggots, it's basically the Fendahl are basically maggots plus premium maggots with the same kind of cute little mouths.
They got the
more of a Triffid feel, perhaps.
They got little tendrils coming out of their mouths. The little, it's like, okay,
but
that's cool.
Once again, I mean, do you think the Fendahl were kind of a scary monster in the Doctor Who roster of monsters?
I remember thinking they were scary. Here's the thing: when I sat down to watch this, I actually remember being a little scared and freaked out by this one when I watched it as like a teenager, and I actually turned out all the lights to see if I could evoke that feeling again, and watched it like at 11 at night or something. And it didn't quite deliver, right? And when I saw the Fendahl in the hallway, the first full size one, I like that moment, and but it has nothing to do with what the monster looks like. Like it's just kind of this plotting, slow moving bug thing that goes down way too easily, and you never really get to see what they do, right? You want to see something. I can't even remember. Is anyone actually killed by a Fendahl?
Yeah,
And
no. There's no danger from the Fendahl, really.
Yeah, and
it's not made clear
exactly. So they just kind of look ominous when they're full size, and on top of that, you never they don't fully explain the Gestalt creature. Is it literally just the person and 12 individuals and individual Fendahl? And then how is that a Gestalt thing, right? Like, do they actually physically come together and turn into something else, which is kind of would be cool, but you never see it.
And you don't see a lot really until the 4th episode, right? It's 3 episodes of running around the mansion, and then only at the end of episode 3, I believe, do we get introduced to our first Fendahl.
I think it's episode 2, right? Isn't it the cliffhanger, or am I wrong? What's the cliffhanger?
I think it's a little later than that, but yeah, okay. It's sort of, if this was a modern Who story, you would compress the hell out of those first 3 episodes.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh no, you're right. It is in episode 3 because the episode 2 cliffhanger is the Doctor does the grabbing the glowing skull move, and for no real reason. I guess he's just checking it out. Like, what are you doing, dude? That's kind of the bad thing right there. Very weird.
Yeah. Why grab the glowing skull, Doctor? I know you're interested in mysteries, but geez,
well, and
you're better than this.
It sets up the end where I love it. Like he basically defeats the Fendahl with an oven mitt and a box. Like that's what he does.
It's very British.
You're like, I can't grab it with my bare hand, but if I grab it with an oven mitt, I'm okay. Yeah. And I'll just throw it in this box, and I'll throw that box into a supernova, and we're done here.
and then sort of weirdly, the canine bits right at the beginning and then right at the end, like you're supposed to care about whether the Doctor wants Canine as his dog.
Yeah.
And then kind of it's settled right at the end where he's like, well, it is my dog, and Canine nods, and Leela's sort of glowing at the fact that they've got a dog now, and but it's just sort of tacked on.
Well, it's the most non sequitur bookends.
Yeah.
If you think about it, like it's just random stuff that was going on outside of this adventure, and we'll just throw it in here and here. And I remember that ending is just so like, it reminded me honestly like of old Star Treks a little bit, where there'd just be this very serious episode and everyone's just on the bridge. Oh, wow, Spock, that was really funny. And we're just on this wagon train, which kind of worked for Star Trek, but here it was just like, what? We just
why should we care about? I mean, if maybe if you'd watched The Invisible Enemy the previous week and you're like, oh, the Doctor ran off with a robot dog and from the 50th century, and let's know more about that. And they sort of, but it's so tacked on, so not blended into the script. And I think that a more checked in script editor might have blended this in a little better. But this was Robert Holmes' last story.
It was a script editor, yeah.
He does sort of feel like he's kind of checked out here.
Yeah, it definitely feels
heading for the exits already.
There's a lot of stuff that you feel like it's particularly like the discontinuities with Leela on the floor, and then I think in episode 2, the Doctor. This has been mentioned in a lot of places. He gets out of the broom closet or wherever he is with no explanation. Like he's locked in there, and then suddenly the door. He just opens the door, and he's just out. And
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because I think it may be time to insert one of our new regular features, which is where is the Clara Splinter?
oh, that didn't occur to me, but that makes perfect sense.
Because that
Right.
is such a plot hole that someone opens that door
Right.
and the Doctor's out, and it's never explained.
Claire's in the hallway. She just
Yep.
the Splinter comes in. There you go. You're out, and now you can get your oven mitt.
And it was the first time since we started doing the Clara Splinter thing that I thought of that at the time. I'm like, oh, there she is. Random door opening.
Nice.
No explanation. Got to be Clara.
But yeah, Robert Holmes leaving isn't just, I think, somewhat attributable to the carelessness on some of the plot elements. It's that this is kind of the last of the horror era.
Yeah.
And it's kind of too bad, but kind of like inevitable as well. I think, as we were just talking about in terms of things people were scared of in the era, like you can only milk that so many times. The 80s were fast approaching, which was a whole tonal shift in all of pop culture that I think John Nathan Turner, who was at this time, saw him in the credits as it was going. I forget what his title was. He was working on Doctor Who at the time.
Yeah. It's interesting. Foreshadowing there. I always thought of that at the end of every credits. Oh, he's here. He's here already, lurking in the background.
Yeah. So clearly, like with Holmes on the way out, apparently, like some of the violence in this story was toned down a bit.
Do you know what was toned down?
Well, there was the killings with the guns at the end. So when Fendahl gets shot, that's not shown. They actually show his bloody head, which is a little bit surprising. But there was a much more graphic end to the scene where the Doctor gives Max the gun. He was actually going to put it in his mouth, and then you would cut away.
Wow.
So that was no. It gives him the gun. The Doctor walks away, and then you just see him. There's the gunshot, and you just see him on the floor. So
that would really play up the fact that the Doctor is enabling a suicide here.
And such a terrible, like, violent and gross one. Like, I mean, just putting that idea in the heads of children. I mean, I have to say that probably the right call to not do the gun in the mouth. Particularly at the time.
There's a thing about the way characters hold guns in old Doctor Who that's super weird, right? It sort of makes you feel like it's a Saturday morning serial or a cowboy kind of movie. The way they just sort of hold the pistol like this, kind of close to the body, like
so exaggerated. Like the actors' movements are exaggerated to show the gun, and like when it's just the gun in a hand, like the zoom in is so massive. Like, and there was a weird point. I just got sense because we're talking about guns. There's a point where Max wanders into Fendelman's lab with him and Colby and pulls out his gun and forces them at gunpoint into the basement. But there's a shot in the middle there where it looks like Fendelman, I think, but basically they zoom in on a gun on the desk while they're at gunpoint already. And someone picks up that gun and nothing ever happens with it. You think there's going to be a struggle with the guns, or there's going to be sort of a Mexican standoff or something. Nope, nothing. It's just randomly inserted there. Again, another thing where it's like, who was this? Like, I guess Holmes. I don't want to blame Holmes for all of it, but like there was clearly, I think, a certain amount of a bit of a rush job on Image of the Fendahl.
It's literally, you're right. It's literally a Chekhov's gun situation that doesn't get resolved. So you're breaking one of the oldest rules of drama. Right there. And it's just that there's also a weird moment. There's a lot of zooming in that computer room, isn't there? And there's a weird moment where they zoom in on the time that is remaining.
Yep.
Like they've only got 3 minutes, but like the time is counting up, first of all, which is weird. And it's sort of in the corner of a TV screen, and it doesn't even say 3 minutes, and it just kind of adds to the general confusion.
Yeah, there's so much weird in that room because there's these like glowing panels in the back that are really just there for show. Then there's all these screens and they're doing different things, and I got to say this is some of the stuff that has not aged well. And I'd really try to give like points for like I try to take into account the time and whatever, but all this stuff that's like they're trying to sort of show oscilloscope type things with the waves and whatever, and it's just really too much. You're trying to emphasize the technological aspect here. And to what end? You don't even really have much other than, there's like a sonic time scanner, which is very technobabbly, but also very Doctor Who.
Yeah, you get the sense we're supposed to be impressed by this room with this bank of computers.
Right.
It's one problem with watching it in our era, right? That you can't put yourself back in the mind of someone in 1977 and see how kind of futuristic this looks. But given that we'd just been to the Green Death recently, and we saw Boss, and Boss's room kind of has really aged well, even though it's old computer equipment, older than the stuff that we see here. It's just sort of loud and in your face and well lit and well designed and colorful, and you're like, this feels Bond-esque.
Well, I love that the Boss also has that thing where your eye goes, which is the big round screen where it's the waveform of his voice, which from a practical, like, makes kind of no sense, but it's like that really gives a bigness to both the room, the set, and the threat. Like it's all telling a story, and it doesn't have to be dark, right? It's all Boss is so bright, and it's like this big control room, and here it's like you're in this old mansion with wood paneling, and it just felt like every 70s era man cave where you might like have a slide projector or like a 22-inch TV, which was probably the best at the time. And they're like, wow, look at this, I've got massive speakers, and
check out my subwoofer,
and my Formica film theater chair, I don't know, like whatever was.
It does have that 70s hi-fi feel.
Exactly.
Hi-fi. That's not a phrase I've used in a long time.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Wow. Find my VCR.
But yeah, it's got that man cave feel. Thea is there, but sort of kind of not really, interposing herself into this very male-dominated environment.
Well, and then she's just ignored. I mean, like she at some point is like almost confessing that she's the Fendahl. Like she doesn't know it, but she's like, she says to Colby or someone like, "It's me," and he's like, "Nah, it's not you. Never mind." Like again, nobody. Like, dude, like, she's in crisis here, and could you maybe explore this a bit? Maybe talk.
There's so much mansplaining that I would almost recommend this episode as, men, if you are not understanding what has been happening in the, the revolution and feminism in recent years, like, take a look at this episode. Take a look at the fact that we've got this massive mansplainer in Colby, and kind of a mansplainer in Max, and like it's just it's all. Well,
and the disappointment that she doesn't do anything about it, right? And that's taken as like normal. Like she just kind of tolerates it. She's ignored and just kind of moves on to the next scene. And it's like it's just looking at it through the lens of today. It's just so sad that her character is treated that way, and the script treats her that way. Like she's just this thing to be possessed by the Fendahl, and we just don't care about her.
Yeah, and the doctor sort of casually announces at one point that Thea's dead.
Right.
Forget about Thea. She's totally taken over now, and nobody cares.
D1000 Doctor or whatever.
Yeah. So pour one out for Thea.
Absolutely,
folks.
So interesting side note that. The doctor says at the end, "I'm going to toss the skull into a supernova. I'm sure it can't survive that." Well, of course, because in the world of Doctor Who, there's nothing ever dies, and there's a million sequels. There was actually a sequel written where the Fendahl returns. It's an audio adventure called Checkmate, although it's in the Caldor City series of adventures, which actually spins off of the Robots of Death, another Chris Boucher script. So there's a weird sort of connection here of combining his two scripts.
Interesting.
And I'm not sure.
And it was a Big Finish audio?
It was a Big Finish audio, and I never listened to it, so I don't know what happens, but it's interesting that the doctor is like, oh yeah, it won't survive a supernova, but it totally does. It's like,
why not just have a scene of the doctor throwing it out the door or something?
Yeah. There it goes, Lena. Bye-bye. That classic Baker. Did
the TARDIS set kind of look at its rattiest
Yeah, it's
to
always
you. It's kind of
it's always rough when you see that the time rotor going up and down and something inside it shaking.
yes,
You're like,
yeah.
okay.
You got a drunk operator just below that, sort of like, oh, I can't quite keep the TARDIS. What do we call the thing that goes up and down?
Well, it's the time rotor,
It's the time rotor,
isn't it? Come on,
it?
fans, tell us. Tell us if we're wrong here. That's the time rotor, baby. And
But it's so shaky. Oh my god!
yeah,
You much rather just didn't
it just
go up and down. At
yeah,
this
because there were
phase.
times I think in the Hartnell era it would just sort of rotate, and the things inside would do other things. And honestly, much better than I would much rather have a black and white rotating Hartnell era than a up and down Baker era, shaky fluorescent bulb era.
Seriously.
console.
And the TARDIS set just kind of looks like it needs a good deep clean.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's kind of ratty, and I always love stories where we go back to the TARDIS. We do in this one. I did not like that. I felt bad for the TARDIS every time we see it. The Doctor's not taking care of the old girl.
Yeah, this is shortly after they sort of ditched the old console room, I think, right? Because they did that for like the first Leela season, and then was that in Invisible? I forget. I think we did the episode where they brought back this one. I forget if it was Talons or one of them, but yeah, it's like you brought back this console room for this.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man.
Yeah, give it that bright,
polished.
shiny, clean. I always remember the opening of the Five Doctors is is Pete Davidson kind of just polishing off the new console because they brought in a new console for this, and he's cleaning it with a cloth. I always remember that scene.
Speaking of John Nathan Turner in the 80s, right? Like that was full on 80s Doctor Who, and I love it. That was awesome.
I'd love to sort of take that to extremes and kind of see the Doctor on his hands and knees with a bucket and a mop, kind of giving that console a good old deep clean because it really needs it, Doctor.
Before we go and before we trash this episode more, I do want to say, before we get to how the evil plot had succeeded, I think the hook at the beginning of this is really, really good, which is to say the riddle of the skull is a really good hook. Like, I remembered that hook even before watching it again, even though I haven't seen this in decades. Oh, right. This is the one with the skull that predates any human skull, right? Because that's a good little riddle, particularly in a time travel episode, because you think, this is time travel. Maybe there's going to be some time travel involved because it's Doctor Who and some human. Like, this is kind of what you might be thinking, right? And I remember, like, it really sort of uncorks your imagination, and it's simple and very, it's just really, really compelling. So I got to give it really good points for setting up an interesting conundrum.
It would be so good if we saw the original owner of that skull at some point.
Yeah, sure.
Apparently it was called Eustace.
Right. Well, I guess that's the nickname, right? Which is kind of too bad because they use it like in episode 1 and then never again. You kind of feel like that would have been a fun callback to the first episode if they did. But there's also a point where they say, like, we excavated it and the reconstruction was great. And I'm not quite sure what that means because the Doctor says it's indestructible.
Yeah.
So I think to reconcile this, to turn a plot hole into something interesting, I think what the Doctor means is like the power within it is indestructible. Like the skull itself is kind of a fossil, right? Like, but that the pattern within, it's almost like when, like I think they did this with the Daleks once and other stuff, but it's a common trope in genre stories where something is split into a bunch of different pieces throughout the world. They're reassembled and it becomes the thing again, right? So that's, I think, what this is, so in other words, to destroy it, you have to take the whole thing and destroy it, like, essentially melt the whole thing down all at once. Right. You can't just bust it.
Yeah. Yes. So shall we talk about what would have happened if the evil plot had succeeded? Which is a great opportunity, Pete, for you to explain to me what the hell the evil plot actually is here.
Well, we have to establish who's evil plot. So is it Max Stales? Is it the Fendahl? I think we have to go with the Fendahl.
Well, it's the Fendahl because Stales' plot does actually succeed, and he kind of doesn't know what he's gotten into. He's in over his head. And
who knew? Evil dude who thinks he's going to control this ancient power.
yeah,
That never
who knew?
happens. It
Who
never
did
gets out of
indeed
control.
know? Yeah, it's not like there's a million stories about the hubris of scientists out there, dude. Pick up a book.
So the
So his
Fendahl-
evil plot succeeds. What is the Fendahl's evil plot?
Well, the Fendahl's evil plot is to consume all life and like essentially feed itself. It's a little bit like Sutex. If it succeeds, sort of what point in the story would we have to change? Because basically, it's got to become the Gestalt creature. So it needs more
So
people.
you get 12, 13 people gathered in a coven, and they're all tied. By the way, tied really lazily with those little ropes that are so
zip
easy
ties,
to undo.
guys. I guess zip ties didn't exist back then. But okay,
it's like they could have untied themselves from the pillars with those knots.
Here's the flip, in my opinion, that makes it a win. In that, when Jack and Leela are in the hallway and they're confronted by the Fendahl and the Fendaline, they're either taken over or the gun jams, and so they're dead and they become Fendaline. So that brings the number to 12 again. And they can essentially become the Gestalt. It can become the Gestalt creature that forms, and the Doctor doesn't have time to do the implosion, and the Doctor's consumed and dead. This is one of those cases where because like the Fendahl consumes life at its core. Like they say this over and over. So like there's no regeneration, and then it essentially just starts spreading throughout the
Doctor
world.
would have what eight lives left, right? And if the Fendahl
I mean,
consumed
theoretically, not counting Timeless Child stuff.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Okay. If he's the Timeless Child,
yes,
and it's almost like infinite life. Does that
Kind of is.
then
But
essentially
we
cancel out the Fendahl?
Sorry, I lost you for a second.
That's
there.
okay. We'll do some editing. But does it cancel out the Fendahl if the Doctor's infinite life and this consumes all life? Boom!
Does it consume his past regenerations as well? And the Doctor's kind of a 10-course meal for a creature like that.
Yeah, I would think it's sated by when it feeds on the Doctor. The other thing is that the Time Lords destroyed the 5th planet to kill the Fendahl. Once they get wind that it's here on Earth and now presumably going to spread to the cosmos once it's done with all life on Earth, would they destroy Earth to try to get it? I think so.
Yeah. You'd kind of have to. Yeah. We've got some Time Lords just off screen in this episode. It feels like they're kind of prepared to step in again. The Earth could become another 5th planet.
Yeah, it becomes Ravalox a little early.
Yeah.
Little Trial of a Time Lord reference there. I don't know if if you've seen that one.
Wow,
But,
deep cut.
Yeah. But I think that's what happens. It just like this is end of the Doctor. It's end of humanity, and
and Time Lords destroy Earth, and that's it. And then the Time War happens, and I guess the Daleks win because the Doctor isn't there to save them.
Yeah.
And
end
of the universe. The Daleks take over.
So, man, lesson: make sure your gun does not jam if you're ever fighting a Gestalt creature that looks like it's made of paper-mâché with rock salt.
That's about to consume all life on the planet.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that was a wild ride.
Does this one work? Is it? What do you think? Is this a shaky Dalek, or is it a, kind of okay Ogron?
It's kind of okay. It's in that sense that we watch old Doctor Who kind of for the images, right? It's the sort of weird freakiness of late 70s Doctor Who. I really enjoy that. It's colorful. It's one of those things you just sort of sit back and let it wash over you.
Yeah.
I'm going to say a very, very shaky Dalek.
I would say it's a Dalek when you got your beer glasses on.
Yeah. I think it's so. We haven't talked about this, but I feel like the randomizer is taking us to episodes where it's asking us the question of what is scary.
Yeah,
right.
fair.
We were just at midnight, where we never see the creature. Here's a story where we don't see any creatures for 3 episodes, and it's just about the threat of it. Doesn't quite work, but you got the skull to go on.
Yeah,
Um,
it's some good atmosphere.
yeah, so it's a little atmospheric. I can see how it might be scary for a small child. But
Or
yeah,
preteen.
I feel
13
yeah
when I saw it.
the randomizer is definitely trying to tell us something or test us in some way with this question of, well, are you scared by this? Well, how about this? How much monster do you need? And I sort of take it back to the God complex where we were complaining about the lack of scariness in any of the rooms, and I feel like
Right.
the randomizer is taking us on a side quest to other potentially scary, like on the edge of being scary, but not quite moments in Who. So.
Yeah, I remember that. I would say in the grand scheme of scary continuum, Midnight probably wins, but there's scariness here, and I think it hit harder with the contemporary audience, which was probably a little more freaked out by this sort of devil worship 70s era stuff. I mean, you even see it in other Doctor Who at the time, like Canine and Company was a couple years after this, and that was another coven worshiping another evil thing, and it was a very common theme. Hardy Boys, you think about that,
right?
So
total satanic panic stuff. You're absolutely right. It did, and we should mention this. It did really take off in the viewership between episode 1 and episode 4. Episode 1 got 6.7 million viewers in the UK. By part 4, you're up to 9.1 million. So people were hooked on this episode. They tuned in. They told their friends.
Yeah, I could see like with word of mouth on like the Skull stuff and the Mansion stuff and all it's just like telling people, man, it was so freaky. Like you should check it out. And I think you could. It's still for that atmospheric stuff can work with perhaps some assistance with drugs or alcohol.
Yes, exactly. It's a good Christmas story to watch, right? Because we're kind of lazy and hazy and just sort of sitting back and let the images watch over us anyway.
I should qualify that I'm not endorsing using any illegal substances. Just you need a little bit of little get your psyche a little motivation, a little extra motivation to get into the atmosphere of this one.
We'd like to advise here on Pull to Open that however you would like to pull to open your mind is okay with us, but that's entirely your decision. But yeah, I hope it was word of mouth on the story rather than word of mouth on Leela's costume that boosted the viewing figures so significantly.
We could hope, at least for most of it. I'm sure there were some dads who got some phone calls at some point.
Because this is an era of 3 channels in the UK, right? There's not a lot to watch. It's all pretty bland. It's all kind of samey. So anything with a little bit of excitement, like a skimpy costume, would certainly, cheer up the folks kind of watching at home.
Well, some of them
stuck between grandstands, the sports show that would precede Doctor Who, and I don't know what would come after in this era. Some kind of crappy cop drama, maybe.
More soccer, I'm sure. All right. So, speaking of the randomizer testing out on what's scary, shall we test the randomizer as to
let's do it
where we may go next,
and
or otherwise?
While I head to the randomizer, Pete, do you want to explain to the viewers at home who
almost
might not
exactly
know?
a year ago, we installed the randomizer into this podcast. Which this does, it takes us to a random episode of Doctor Who. It is the source of our random power.
And I tell you, it has worked in terms of avoiding the Black Guardian. We've mostly avoided him so far.
At least since Mount Mordred Undead. But yeah, that was actually the first post randomizer in the show. Post randomizer Black Guardian appearance. So
you're like, no, randomizer, no.
Of all the stories, randomizer to pick. But so because computers are so darn bad at picking random numbers, we actually look to a special service to power our randomizer, random.org, which actually looks at atmospheric noise.
Yes. And the randomizer was built by Dr. Mads Haar.
Wait, Dr.
H-A-A.
Wait,
Dr. Mads, yes. Dr. Mads Haar, which sounds like such a Doctor Who, Stallman-style villain.
That's amazing.
I
that his
really-
name is Mads.
This is what I mean. We'd love to have Dr. Mads on the show since we're giving such props every episode of random.org.
Yeah, Mads. Come on out.
Yeah. Maybe we can have an on the final episode when we finally get to 300 and something, which it'll be by then.
Well, after this one, I'm going to insist that Dr. Mads wears a white lab coat. Because nothing says I'm a scientist more than that, clearly and loudly throughout Image of the Fendahl.
I do hope that he's working on his evil laugh.
And a mustache twist. All that.
Yes, it'd be perfect. Anyway, I'm set up here at random.org, which we call the Executor.
And I have the Pull to Open Codex open, our Google Sheet, with every single Doctor Who story numbered 1 to 298, now including Doctor Who Flux. And we will now generate a random number between those numbers to find out.
And if we hit one that we've been at before, then it's time locked.
Right. We bounce off it.
And we bounce off it. All right, we ready?
The Codex is ready.
All right, give me a countdown.
In 3, 2, 1.
No, not the mind probe.
225.
Whoa, we're late. Okay, 225. Oh, we are at closing time.
Ooh, okay. I like that one.
Yeah, it immediately follows the God Complex in the chronology.
Interesting.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
The randomizer loves taking us to episodes just after the episodes we've been to.
Yeah.
Right? Especially in the Capaldi era, it did a lot of that. It did it with Planet of Fire.
Yeah. Sort of.
No,
it was
the
one immediately following the introduction of actually, did we start with the death of Chameleon? Then we went to the introduction. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, and then we went through all the Chameleon episodes. That's right.
All 2 of them. So what's this closing time? Yeah, this is interesting. It'll be. I remember this. So this is kind of a sequel to another episode, which also guest starred James Corden, who is now an international superstar.
Yeah.
So this will be interesting to view it years later. In the post-Corden era, we'll call it.
Right. It was a sequel to, was it The Lodger?
The Lodger, right.
The first episode he was in, which I really loved. It's interesting that we're going here first, but okay, I guess that's random.
Something to teach us about what's scary, I'm sure. That's
Indeed.
what's going on.
Well, looking forward to our next adventure, Pete.
Me too.
And, why don't you tell folks how they can find us?
I will do exactly that, because they found us somehow here on a podcast service. We are a podcast, in case you weren't sure. As I said at the beginning, please subscribe if you haven't already. Tell your friends to subscribe and leave a review. Again, those reviews really help us, especially on Apple. If you don't mind giving us 5 stars, we will not complain. But please just leave a review. Tell us what you think. And we'd love to read your review out on the air. Also follow us on social. We're very active on TikTok at Pull to Open. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at Pull to Open 63, sharing out more stuff there. So that's where we are. Please come find us. Say hi. You can always ping us on Twitter. And we will see you guys next time for even more random fun.
Yes, time to close. We'll see you there.
Oh, I see what you did there. Take care, folks.
Bye, guys.